why are you here? Why don't you go back to Jamaica?
Really?
And then I told them, well, I was born here. And they're like, what? Well, did your parents, come over here to have you so that you could be an American citizen? I'm like, what?
Hey Alex, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. How are you
Okay,
doing?
so happy to have finally be able to talk with you. You're actually my first virtual random interviews with Ryan. So good job on being a pioneer. What time is it by you, by the way?
It is now 5:03 a.m.
Man, that's intense. Are you a morning person usually?
Yeah, I'm definitely a morning person. Don't know if I was always a morning person, but I've developed that chronotype in the last decade, I think.
Okay, what changed? Why did you decide to be a morning person?
I think just like mornings are just a very quiet time. It seems to correlate with a lot of successful people. So
Okay.
maybe that's what I was thinking originally. But
Yeah.
also, is this a good time to like read or practice, meditate, things like that? Read the Bible, any kind of thing that I want to do, like a meditative, quiet practice.
Okay, cool. Can you take me through your routine, starting of the morning until you start the workday?
Yeah, sure. I usually start getting up and going straight to the kitchen to get a glass of water
Okay.
because I believe that you should have a glass of water upon waking. Kind of like starts the system up,
Do
and
you
then I
brush
go
your
through a
teeth or do
ritual
you just go straight to the glass?
straight to the water,
Oh, wow.
usually room temperature water first,
Yeah.
and then after that goes through my system a little bit. Then I'll make a matcha. So I have like matcha powder. I have like this whole matcha creation kit that has like a particular bamboo brush. And you swirl it
Okay.
around, add in some oat milk usually, and then that would be like my starter drink. Um,
Okay.
then from there, make breakfast for the family usually,
Okay.
and then get ready for work. That's my usual routine.
So how much longer before the family wakes up?
Yeah, on a good morning, I have 2 or 3 hours, or 1 or 2 hours, and that's the time. So in between making the matcha and making breakfast, that's like variable time. That's time to study, whether it's read
Mm,
papers or read articles that I've put off that were long form. Look up
okay.
something in the Bible real quick if I just had something that I
Yeah.
really wanted to look in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's like my study, personal reflection, study, meditation time.
Okay, great. And I mean, I think that's what I really like about you. You're a deep thinker. You're definitely a mind. I once heard your wife said that you're Alex in Wonderland.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, do you find that about yourself? What would you say are your top three talents?
Top three talents. Wow, interesting. I think the thing about me, I don't know if they're talents, but definitely characteristics, is one I have a strong bias for neophilia. As I like newness. I like things, concepts that haven't been maybe interacted before. So I tend to chase those things.
Okay.
Also, I like understanding. So if there's a gap in my understanding, someone uses a word or a concept, and I'm like, I don't understand that, then I'm going to spend time trying
Okay.
to figure out what the answer is. And then I think the third thing that I tend to do is I tend to then, as I accumulate more knowledge, I tend to make connections across things that probably
Mm,
are somewhat novel. They just come to me. I mean, sometimes you could say, you point to God and say this is like a divine experience.
yeah.
And then when those things come to me, it's like a flash of insight. So I think my brain is wired to get a dopamine kick anytime I discover something that seems novel to me because I've connected things from different
Yeah.
domains.
Okay, that's cool. You know, I'm just remembering when I was studying comp sci, I was probably in my second year. You would have left University of West Indies by that time. I remember asking you to help me with some homework. It was a Java banking app that I was supposed to write, and you pretty much wrote the thing and gave it to me. And then the thing is, I understood it, but I did not understand it at the same time. I was wondering, why did you make it so complex? At the time, I didn't get in computer science what we call the solid principles. So you had like interfaces and all the nice contractual stuff, and I was a bit confused. But yeah, you did it. So it helped me, and it didn't help me. But
I'm
yeah,
probably
yeah.
still making that mistake today all the time. I mean,
Why
like
would you
at
say
work
that?
with like interns and so on, sometimes they'll give me
Okay.
blank stares and I'm like, okay, maybe I Gave them too much.
So tell me, do you remember what you wanted to do with your life at 5 years old?
Yes, five or at least around that time, I wanted to be a scientist. I
A
wanted to
scientist.
be a zoologist or some kind of scientist in the natural world, some kind of natural scientist.
Okay, how about 10?
So 10, then I realized, I think at 10 I had moved to Jamaica at that point
Okay,
and just didn't know any scientists at all. And it just seemed like a very remote job that wasn't going to be possible. And I think
yeah.
at that time I started thinking about like business, like I wanted to run my own business.
Okay, how about 15?
15, I discovered technology. So at that point, it had morphed into wanting to do like a technology business. And I think at 15, I was actually running my own businesses. I had like two businesses around 15. They're they weren't super structured, but it was like
Yeah.
extra money. I was writing papers for like university students. Really, my one teacher that I had, my Spanish teacher, she didn't want to write all her papers down, so she wrote them on paper, and then she gave
Yeah.
them to me, and I typed them. And so that was a business. And then
Okay.
the other business was, fixing people's computers. People were like, oh, my hard drive is making a funny noise, and I would take the hard drive out, reformat it, reinstall Windows, and put it on, and then get paid for that. And I was like, woohoo, yeah.
Okay, nice. Then I remember a story of was it you or was it Shane, your brother, that was hijacking your neighbor's internet? What was that about?
Yeah, so we had this friend at school. Actually, it was Shane's friend, and he
Okay.
he had found these programs that would install Trojans on people's computers. Most of the problem at that time was that we didn't have, you had to do dial-up, and you had to have, the extra package to get the dial-up, and neither of our families thought that was priority. So how to get
Yeah.
dial-up access, and so the way we figured it out to do it was to use this program to put keyloggers on people's computers, and then we could see their password and username and password.
Okay.
That's not a very, what should I say, virtuous time of my life.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because the fact that you could do that.
Okay, okay, cool. How did they find out that you were using their internet?
How did they find they were using their internet? I mean, the thing about the internet back then, there weren't a whole lot of controls, I think. At some point, if I remember correctly, the company that was doing it was, what's the name of the companies in Jamaica
Um,
that?
yeah, I don't remember, but it's right at the tip of my brain.
But at some point, they started actually putting in this thing where they'd knock you off and say someone else is already using this. But for at
Okay.
least a good couple of months, they wouldn't do that, and so you could have multiple people on the same
Oh,
username and
okay.
password, and they had to tamper down the fraud at some point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But by the time they had started doing that, my parents actually did wise up and get our own proper internet and added that, and so I was kind of out of that
Okay, okay,
business.
nice. All right, so what do you do for a living now
So right now I'm a software engineer at Amazon Web
at Amazon?
Services, AWS.
And and what did you study at university?
I studied computer science.
Okay. Do you love what you do at
Yes,
Amazon?
I do. I think it's super exciting, given that cloud computing is like steadily becoming, I would say, a mainstay in enterprise. And the part of AWS I work on is specifically geared towards enterprise services. And
Okay.
I just see this trend of more and more people. I mean, I think the thing about it is because I've had such a long career in tech, from working in companies before there was even a cloud, and everybody had their own little servers, and then they had a server room, and then they had like
Yeah.
a data center. And so I've gone and I've seen sort of like the growth of it, and then kind of seen all the problems that come with having your own on-prem data center, the overhead, the patching, and all of that. So to
Yeah.
see how that has now morphed into the cloud, I mean, to me, I think I've had a really privileged experience, seeing that and actually being where I am right now. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, that's definitely cutting edge, I would say. Okay, so all right, walk me through your career progression from leaving university. What was your first job, and from job to job until you reached the Amazon?
Yeah, man, it's been such a long. Actually, I haven't had that many jobs. I don't think.
Okay.
So I went to school in Jamaica, University of West Indies. You just mentioned that we were in the same
Yeah.
ComSci program. And then after that, I worked for a year in Jamaica at a company called MC Systems, which was actually at the time, they were kind of cutting edge in
Okay.
Jamaica in a sense because they were doing things other people weren't doing yet. We did the Verifone terminals. So whenever
Okay.
people did their banking at the ATM, or if you went and you swiped to get, points on your Digicel card to top it up, our company
Okay.
did that software. So we did the server on the back end that actually talked to the Verifone terminals, and we did the software on the terminals themselves. So this, as you can see, this is like the beginning of like a distributed system where you have these all these different node things, and they talk to this thing in the like somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then after I worked there for a year, I'm an American citizen, so I was born here. My father was studying, and I always had the intention of coming back at some point.
Okay.
And I think it took me a year to get the courage and to save the airplane fee. And during that time, also, I was very bullish on the internet because I
Yeah.
saw what we were building. We're building all this stuff in this programming language called C. And in my mind, there was things like Java, these other programming languages that were coming along, PHP. And I thought, well, C is just old school. Why would you want to spend all that effort building
Yeah.
these heavy programs, when you have these much more dynamic and modern languages like PHP? I laugh at
I
that
know,
now,
right?
but at the time, it felt like it was cutting edge.
Yeah.
And there weren't a lot of people doing that in Jamaica, at least at the level that I wanted to do it at. So I took like a bunch of certificates in PHP, and then I went and looked for a company in Florida called Revelex. And so then I worked for them for maybe 2 years, and they were doing
Okay.
travel. So they had an online travel booking system, and that was pretty cool because they white labeled and they resold it to different like small mom and pops. In many ways, this
Yeah.
was like application as a service. This was, you have a travel agency, you want to have a website, you want to have a booking website where people can actually come and book. And they were kind of like pioneering this idea of, okay, we're going to build that out, and they built that in PHP. After I did that for 2 years, I kind of felt like, I guess in some way I got somewhat bored, and I wanted
Okay.
to again push myself to be more cutting edge. And so that's what led me to leave that company and go work for another company called LexisNexis. And I actually stayed there for the majority of my career. I was there for maybe 10, 12 years.
Yeah, I remember, was there a story of that company trying to keep you? I think they counter offered when you wanted to leave at some point.
Yes, that is true. I had stayed there a really long time, so I'd gone there when I started working there. So to give you a background of what that company does big
Okay.
data analytics. They take data from lots of public data sources, like the DMV was one of our sources, although it's not 100% public. It's kind of public private. And then
Okay.
they took data from some contributory databases that they created from places like Experian and all these like credit unions. And so what we did with that data is then we mixed and matched and made connections between them and then sold reports. And this helped a lot of people. It helped, private investigators trying to find criminals. It helped with collections agencies trying to find people trying to bounce off on their bills.
Wow.
It
That's
then, of
cool.
course, created more data sharing between the credit agencies. More than the credit agencies, insurance companies use this a lot because you could go to Geico, have a relationship with them, and then skip and then go to Progressive, and then Progressive is like, well, we don't know your history.
Yeah.
Who knows what you were doing with Geico? But then now with our product, we could actually make the connection across all of that. So it's a pretty cool product. I ended up not really working on the major product itself. I started working on internal tooling, and so at the time when I joined the company, they had grown really fast. They bought like 10, 20 companies and had disparate internal systems. And so they
Mm.
wanted to connect it all up together. And so we had this new thing that we're just building out to build a console, internal web console. And I was kind of like maybe employee number 3 on that. And by the
Okay.
time I left, I was the engineering manager for a team of 12 engineers across the globe in Britain, Philippines, India,
Okay.
and then I came to
Cool.
Amazon.
And then you came to Amazon. I know you interviewed at Google once. What was that
Yes.
like?
Yeah, interviewing at Google is pretty cool. I think in many ways I just wasn't as prepared to interview at Google. But
Okay.
the funny thing is, preparing to interview at Google did help me to get my Amazon job, right?
Okay.
Google's notoriously very picky about who they hire. Multiple rounds of interviews, multiple algorithms, and I just wasn't as familiar with that style of interviewing. I mean, all my career, you go in, They ask you a bunch of questions about, barely even ask you questions about design patterns. Usually ask you questions of like random syntax question ideas and some random ask you questions about what you did in your past job, and then you have the job. Just like that. That's not what it was like
Yeah,
at Google. That's not what it's like in big tech in general.
yeah,
Like I'm at Amazon now, and we kind of follow the same kind of pattern at Google where we have multiple rounds of interviews and multiple
yeah,
algorithms and stuff. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. It opened my
yeah.
eyes.
Okay. How long did it take you to prepare for the Google interview?
I think at the time I took 3 months to
3 months
prepare.
ago.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And what would you say has been your greatest challenge just traversing between Jamaica and the US from job to job? What was the hardest thing to overcome?
I think the hardest thing to overcome is the cultural differences. And this, I think, is actually my theory for why you have underrepresentation in tech. I think it's more about the acclimatization. There's this whole thing about acculturative stress. So to
Yeah.
give you an example, when I first went to Revelix, those folks were playing rock music and cursing all day. And I was like, what are these people doing? Especially from my, Christian background. I'm like, what are they
Yeah.
doing? And then I remember one or two engineers, once I was traveling with them alone, they asked me, why are you here? Why don't you go back to Jamaica?
Really?
And then I told them, well, I was born here. And they're like, what? Well, did your parents, come over here to have you so that you could be an American citizen? I'm like, what? So those, I mean, like, those are the kinds of things that,
Wow.
you know, you have to
Yeah.
get used to that.
Yeah.
You don't expect it and you think that we're past that. And
Yeah.
I think in every company I've gone to, even going to LexisNexis was a cultural difference, but the biggest cultural difference I think was coming to Amazon. So it's like a completely different culture here.
Yeah. Would you switch your career?
I think I would because of my bias for new things. I don't think I would move away from tech completely, but in terms of where I would have my major focus, I could see myself switching.
And switching focuses a little bit. What would you say are your hobbies?
Yeah, my hobbies. My number one hobby is parenting.
Parenting. For sure, me too.
I also like to read, go hiking, long walks, travel. I don't know if travel can be considered a hobby, but I consider it a hobby mostly because it's not necessarily long distance travel, but even just short distance travel and immersion into new cultures. That's really my hobby.
Is there any particular project that you're working on now that you're excited about?
Oh, yes. I have one project. I've always had a lot of side projects, but one project I'm working on right now that I'm super excited about that I call the Evergreen Bible, which is
Mm,
this idea of being able to do continuous translation of the Bible into current dialects or current speaking patterns. I think it's a really
yeah.
long term project, but it's something that I'm fascinated with right now.
All right, so now I'm going to ask you 10 rapid fire questions. Don't think too hard about it. The first answer that comes to your mind, you can answer it.
All right.
Okay. Have you ever used someone else's toothbrush?
Yes.
Yeah. Who?
My wife's.
Your wife. Okay. That's permissible, I suppose. Who was your first crush?
Oh wow. The name's on top of my tongue. I think her name was Jessica.
Jessica.
It's a really long
Okay.
time ago.
Do you remember what age?
Yeah, I was like 7.
7. Okay. What's the longest you've ever gone without taking a bath?
Yikes. I'd like to say a max 48 hours. I don't think anything
Okay.
longer than that.
Okay. That's acceptable. At least to me. I know some people would be really grossed out. All right. Coffee or tea?
Team.
What's your favorite vacation?
My favorite vacation is always somewhere I've never been before, especially somewhere on the historical track of interesting, which is everywhere really. But yeah.
What's your favorite book?
I have two ways I can answer this. I shouldn't think about it too hard to know, but my first thing is the last book I read is usually my always my answer. But if I was to
Okay.
go a little bit deeper, the book that I think has changed my thinking a lot in recent times is a book called *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari.
Okay, I've been hearing about this book a lot. I need to read it. All right. If you could have a conversation with any person in history, who would it be?
I'd have to say Jesus Christ.
Jesus. Yeah.
There's so many people, but I
Straightforwardly.
think for him, the claim of being God and man is quite an interesting claim to go and investigate. And also because I'm super interested in how many things we got wrong about him.
Okay. For me, 3 years and he's still changing the world. 3 years of ministry, that's just amazing. What's one of your biggest fears?
Not being able to provide for my family. I think that's
Okay.
sort of like number one for me, being a good husband and father. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
sort of like from a responsibility standpoint, if I don't get that right, nothing else really matters as much.
Got you. And what makes you angry?
Lack of understanding. And I mean that in a more broader term because I am so interested in understanding things. I tend to get upset when I see other people get lazy about trying to understand things and jump to conclusions without digging a little deeper. Gets me angry is a hard word, but it gets me maybe aggravated.
Okay, got you. And the final question. It's 7 o'clock on the dot. Where is Usher?
You mean Usher, the singer?
Yeah, the singer.
He's 7 o'clock. He's on the drop top.
Yes. Yeah. He's in his drop top cruising the streets. All right, so the next time you find someone who maybe is Jamaican and migrates to the US and is interested in computer science, but have all these cultural issues that they need to get over to become successful, and they want to work like in the bleeding edge, cutting edge, how would you encourage them?
I would say study the culture. I mean, know that you are going to probably bring a perspective that can be appreciated by other folks. But also, it's always good to respect what comes before. I think instead of coming in and thinking these people are all wrong, there may be some validity there. But also having the confidence to bring your own perspective is what I would say. And I think it's also important to know that nothing in life or no path is linear. It's always meandering, and sometimes the best discoveries are not the things you plan for. So just stick with it.
Very nice. Okay, thank you so much, Alex. This was great. I feel that we got it done. Thank you.
Have a good one.
All right, peace out, people. Peace out. What's your favorite color? Mine is green. While you're thinking about it, why don't you consider subscribing? What we do here is that we help you and your goals to have a nice stick-to-itiveness in your relationship. So see you in the next video.